In the blistering heat of an August morning, the fate of empires trembled in a barren plain in southern Italy. The ash shimmered with dust on destiny. 80,000 Roman soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, the largest army the Republic had ever summoned. The Brenn's armor glinted under the merciless sun, their standards flooded like golden flames. They believed this day would bring glory. Instead, it would bring ruin. Across the field, a smaller army waited, veterans from Africa, Spain, and Gaul. Men who had crossed mountains on rivers for one man, Hannibal Barca. To his enemies, he was a ghost of terror. To his soldiers, he was a gid of war, calm, calculating, and born to defy Rome itself. What would unfold here at Cannae would not be a battle, but an execution, a symphony of death conducted by genius. In one day, Hannibal would rewrite the art of warfare, turning Rome's greatest strength into its greatest weakness. By nightfall, the soil would drink the blood of 70,000 men, and from that crimson earth would rise a legend of brilliance and brutality, courage and catastrophe that would echo through history for more than 2,000 years. This is the story of Cannae, where ambition met annihilation, and the Roman Republic faced its darkest day. If stories like this move you, tales of courage, genius, and the turning points that shaped our world, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and join our journey through time. Because every click helps us bring forgotten history back to life, and every story deserves to be remembered. Long before the dust rose over Cannae, a shadow had already fallen across Rome. For 2 years, the unthinkable had happened. The invincible legions of the Republic were being hunted, ambushed, destroyed not by kings or gids, but by a single man from Carthage. Hannibal Barca, the son of a general, the heir to a vow. As a boy, he had stood before his father, Hamilcar, and sworn eternal hatred toward Rome. That promise had carried him across the snows of the Pyrenees, through the frozen passes of the Alps, and into the beating heart of Italy, an odyssey so impossible that even his enemies whispered his name with awe. The world of 216 BC was a crucible of empires. Rome, the rising colossus, ruled by discipline and iron. Carthage, the merchant city of the sea, ruled by wealth and cunning. Their rivalry was not born in a single year, but forged through generations, a duel between ambition and revenge. In the early days of this Second Punic War, Rome had met Hannibal head-on, and paid in rivers of blood. At Trebia, his army lured the Romans into an icy death trap, slaughtering thousands in the freezing waters. At Lake Trasimene, he struck again, a ghost in the morning fig, destroying yet another Roman army so completely that the hills ran red for days. 50,000 Romans had fallen, and still, Hannibal marched in. But Rome did not kneel. Under the steady hand of Quintus Fabius Maximus, the Delayer, the Republic learned patience. Fabius shadowed Hannibal, cut his supplies, harassed his forages, and refused open battle. He traded pride for survival, time for endurance. It was strategy by attrition, clever, calculated, but unbearable for a nation raised in conquest. For Rome was not built to wait. The people demanded vengeance. The Senate demanded action. The Gids, they said, demanded blood. And so, in the summer of 216 BC, the Republic raised the largest army in its history, 8 full legions, and an equal number of allies, 80,000 men armed not only with swords and shields, but with anger. The twin commanders reflected the nation's divided soul. Lucius Aemilius Paulus, cautious, experienced, born of patrician blood. And Gaius Terentius Varro, a populist firebrand who promised victory through sheer Roman might. They were opposites bound by duty, alternating command each day, a system that had served Rome well in times of order, but would prove fatal in case. When Hannibal seized the grain depot at Cannae, deep in Apulia, it was not just a strategic move, it was a challenge. The Carthaginian general dared Rome to face him in open ground, under the blazing southern sun, where the dry wind would blind their eyes and choke their throats. And Rome accepted. It was not reason that led 80,000 men to that plain, it was pride. They marched believing their numbers would crush him, their courage would overwhelm him, their goods would favor them. They did not yet understand that they were walking into the mind of a genius. For Hannibal had not simply come to fight Rome. He had come to teach her the price of arrogance. The summer of 216 BC scorched the Italian plains with a merciless sun. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Every stalk of grain near the fortress of Cani shimmered in the heat. Every gust of the Hetlebexia wind carried dust and omen. Through that haze came the thunder of marching feet, the Roman host. 80,000 men, a moving city of iron and discipline. Banners snapped in the dry wind. The brims of their helmets blazed like 1,000 small suns. Centurions barked orders in voices made hoarse by days of marching. They believed they were marching toward triumph, toward the day Rome would erase the stain of humiliation. Across the plain, Hannibal watched them approach. His army, barely half the size, was a tapestry of nations. Africans hardened under desert suns, Spaniards swift with curved blades, Gauls fierce and reckless, and the Numidian horsemen, born to the saddle, fast as thought, lethal as lightning. They had followed him for years, across rivers, over mountains, through victory and hardship. They did not fight for Carthage, they fought for him. Each man knew his place in the great design that would soon unfold. For Hannibal was not preparing for a battle, he was composing a symphony. He chose his ground with the patience of an artist. To the north ran the river Aufidus, anchoring one flank and limiting Roman maneuver. To the south stretched open plains, perfect for cavalry. And the sun, that brutal August sun, would rise behind the Carthaginian lines, forcing the Romans to fight with its blinding glare and the choking dust of the wind in their faces. Every element of nature would serve him. Even the air would become a weapon. In the Roman camp, tension simmered. It was Varro's day to command, and he burned for glory. He saw the enemy's smaller numbers, the strange crescent shape of their line, and mistook it for weakness. He wanted to strike hard, crush fast, end Hannibal's legend in a single morning. His commander, Paulus, counseled restraint. He saw what Varro could knit, the perfection of the enemy's calm. But Roman tradition demanded obedience to the commander of the day. And so, against every instinct of prudence, 80,000 Romans prepared to meet 40,000 veterans in open combat. In Hannibal's camp, a different ritual unfolded. The Carthaginian general walked among his men, speaking not from a dais but face to face, in their own tongues. To the Spaniards, he promised gold and glory. To the Gauls, revenge against the arrogant Romans who had once enslaved their tribes. To the Africans, he spoke as a son of Carthage, reminding them of their ancestors who had ruled the seas. His words bound them together, knit by nation, but by faith in him. Hannibal's officers, Hasdrubal with the heavy cavalry, Mahabal with the nimble Numidians, and the African veterans who had fought beside him since Saguntum, knew every beat of the plan. The center would yield. The flanks would hold. The cavalry would encircle. It was not bravery that would win the day, it was geometry. As dawn approached, the sky glowed with the color of molten copper. The Carthaginian soldiers checked their weapons in silence. Roman horns answered across the plain, deep, resonant, confident. The ground trembled under the tramp of disciplined feet. When the first light spilled over the horizon, both armies stood arrayed, two worlds facing each other. Rome, disciplined, proud, innumerable. Carthage, cunning, agile, and ready. Between them lay a dusty strip of earth that would soon become a graveyard. Hannibal looked across that field and saw not 80,000 men, but 80,000 opportunities. He knew that once the Romans advanced, the pride would drive them forward, and their numbers would crush them from within. He raised his hand, a simple gesture that set history in motion. The Battle of Cani had begun. The sun climbed higher, cruel and pitiless. By mid-morning, the plain of Cani shimmered like a furnace. From horizon to horizon, the air was alive with dust, heat, and tension. 80,000 Romans stood in formation, a sea of brims and scarlet. Their shields overlapped, forming a living wall of iron. Their banners, the golden eagles of the legions, glowed in the haze like symbols of divine power. It was an army that believed itself unstoppable. Across the field, Hannibal's men waited in silence. Their armor was mismatched, the banners foreign, their tongues divided, but their purpose was one. Hannibal rode the line slowly, his calm presence like a blade through fear. He looked upon each formation, the Spaniards in the center, the Gauls beside them, the Africans crouched in either wing, unsaw knit men, but instruments in a masterpiece. Then, the trumpets sounded. The Roman legions advanced. The ground shook beneath the weight of 80,000 marching feet. Shields lucked, spears lured. They moved as a single organism of war. From above, it must have looked like a Bren's tide sweeping forward to engulf a smaller, fragile shore. Hannibal watched, unflinching. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had foreseen. When the first missiles flew, Roman Pelar arcing through the sky like a storm of iron, his front line braced. Spears thudded into shields, clanged off helmets, and scattered across the earth. The Carthaginian response came swift on sharp, javelins, arrows, stones hurled back in a rugged but deadly chorus. Dust exploded between the lines. The air filled with the screams of the first to fall. Then came the crash. Two worlds collided. The Roman front smashed into Hannibal's center with the force of an earthquake. The impact sent ripples through the ranks as shields splintered, swords clanged, and bodies slammed together. The Gauls and Spaniards in the middle gave ground, slowly, deliberately, exactly as Hannibal had ordered. They did not break, they bent. Step by bloody step, they retreated in perfect rhythm, forming a crescent that bowed inward toward the Carthaginian rear. To the Romans, it looked like victory. The enemy line was folding. Their momentum grew, the weight of tens of thousands pressed forward, crushing their own ranks into a tighter mass. But in that density lay doom. The legions, so proud of their precision, lost their space to maneuver. Officers could no longer command. Soldiers could barely swing their swords. They were becoming what Hannibal had envisioned, a vast, suffocating knit of men. In the wings, his trap waited. The African infantry, veterans clad in captured Roman armor, stood motionless until the signal came. Then, as if unleashed by the Gids, they pivoted inward. Two steel jaws snapping shut in the Roman flanks. The men who had thought themselves hunters now found themselves the hunted. The legionaries in the edges fell first, cut down by disciplined African ranks wielding Roman blades. The shouts of command turned to screams of confusion. In the dust and case, no one could see the shape of the battlefield, only the dying could. Then came the final stroke. From the far left flank, Hasdrubal's heavy cavalry, the Shuck riders of Spain and Carthage, smashed through the Roman horsemen and swept around behind the Roman line. At the same moment, the Numidian light cavalry struck from the right, their agile mounts dotting through gaps like shadows. Together, they encircled the Roman army completely. What had begun as a frontal assault had become a perfect circle, 80,000 men trapped in a tightening ring of death. Inside that circle, there was no strategy, no order, only panic. Men trampled one another in the crush. The press of biddies was so dense that soldiers could not raise their swords, could barely breathe. Those at the center suffocated before ever touching an enemy. Those at the edge died by the blade. The Battle of Cannae had ceased to be a battle. It was a slaughter. For hours, the killing went on. The sun burned overhead, turning the field into a charnel furnace. The cries of the dying rose in waves, fading only when exhaustion replaced terror. Roman courage did not falter. They fought until their arms could no longer lift a sword, but courage could not defeat geometry. As the afternoon waned, Hannibal's troops closed in, tightening the noose. The Roman commanders fought amid the case, Paulus mortally wounded, refusing to flee, Varro escaping with a handful of survivors. By sunset, the plain was silent save for the caw of carrion birds. 70,000 Romans lay dead or dying. A generation of senators, nobles, and soldiers, the pride of the Republic, erased in a single day. No Roman army before or after would ever face annihilation so complete. When night fell, Hannibal rode among the biddies of the fallen. His hosse's hooves sunk into the blood-soaked dust. Even his veterans were awed by what they had done, not in triumph, but in disbelief. They had witnessed perfection, the kind of victory that would echo for eternity. In that moment, Hannibal Barca stood at the height of his genius, his legend sealed forever. He had destroyed the mightiest army of the ancient world with half its number. Yet even he must have known, in the stillness of that crimson dusk, that he had achieved what no man could ever repeat, and that such brilliance would never be forgotten, nor forgiven. When dawn broke the next morning, the plain of Cannae was no longer a battlefield, it was a grave. Tens of thousands of Roman biddies carpeted the earth, their armor glinting in the pale light like scales of a fallen dragon. The wind carried the stench of blood and smoke across the silent fields where crows gathered in black clouds. In one day, the Republic had been gutted. 8 legions, the pride of Rome, annihilated. A quarter of the Senate dead. So many Roman nobles perished that entire bloodlines vanished from history. News of the disaster reached the city like a funeral bell. Mothers tore their hair in the streets. The temples overflowed with prayers and wails. Even the Gids, it was said, had turned their faces away. Yet from this abyss, something extraordinary happened. Rome did not collapse, she did not sue for peace. She did not kneel. Instead, the Senate forbade mourning. The Republic would not wear black. The city that had lost everything stood taller, silent, defiant. While Hannibal waited for surrender, Rome raised new legions. Boys too young to shave, men too old to fight, all took up arms. They forged swords from temple gates, armor from their ancestors' tombs. They would fight again and again and again, until Carthage itself lay in ashes. Cannae was Hannibal's masterpiece, but it was also his curse. He had shown the world what genius could achieve, but not what genius could sustain. Rome's strength was never its armies. It was its will. And that will would one day destroy the man who had brought her to her knees. Excellent. Let's close the circle. Below is the final piece of the chronicle, the quiet echo after the storm. Centuries have passed, yet the name Cannae still carries the weight of awe and terror. It remains the symbol of perfect victory, and of the terrible price of pride. In the dust of that august plain, we see both the brilliance of a single mind and the endurance of a civilization that refused to die. Hannibal's genius carved his name into eternity, but Rome's resilience built an empire that would outlast him by centuries. Every age has its Cannae, moments when power meets its mirror, when arrogance meets consequence. From the ashes of defeat, greatness is tested, not granted. If you believe that courage, endurance, and history's forgotten lessons still matter, then walk with us into the past. Because the stories that shaped our world are not gone. They're waiting to be remembered.